Sometimes, in order to follow where God is leading us, we have to wear spiritual blinders. I talk about that in the chapter on Joshua. Horses wear blinders so that they won't get distracted by what's around them, especially at the races. And we have to imagine that we're wearing spiritual blinders sometimes when God is leading us on a scary path. And the idea of spiritual blinders is also true when it comes to temptation. Because if we don't wear spiritual blinders, sometimes we get distracted by some of the things around us. And temptation isn't just one big decision. It's 1,000 little decisions that we make that lead up to that big decision. That was true in the story of David and Bathsheba. David is somewhere he's not supposed to be. It was the time when kings go off to war, and David was home. He sent Joab out with the king's army. And so often when it comes to temptation, we are where we're not supposed to be. And that's where David was. And then the second part of the passage that shows that he was where he wasn't supposed to be is that it was evening. This was a time when typically in that culture, many people would bathe to prepare for the evening meal. And they did that on their roofs. This was not unusual because they would collect the rainwater and then they would bathe on their roofs. Now, what I found out when I was in Jerusalem, actually I went on a study tour many, many years ago when I was at Fuller Seminary. And I remember the day that we went and we sort of looked at where David's palace was. Through excavations, they've been able to show where it was. And Jerusalem is a city on a hill, and the king's palace was always built at the top so that he could walk out and look down on his kingdom. And so when we were there that day, we imagined the story. Of course, David, when he came out on his roof, he could see all the roofs of everybody beneath him. And so when you think about that, it's evening, it's a time when people are bathing, and David goes outside. Now, I preface this story that way because I think so often we have either seen a movie or we have this idea that Bathsheba was kind of doing a flash dance number on her roof. Now, some of you are a little too young to even know what flash dance is, but go back to the 80s. It was a movie where Jennifer Beals does this sort of, the water comes down, it's a very sensual, and we imagine that Bathsheba is doing something like that. But the truth is, Scripture is silent about that. We don't know how modest or immodest she was being, but we do know that her husband was part of the king's army and he was away. So it's very likely that she assumed that David was away as well, because David was the king and he was supposed to be with his army. So whatever is going on in Uriah's mind, it's doubtful that she's thinking that she is being watched as she bathes in the evening. And from his highest roof, David walks outside and sees her. Now, I just want to stop right there in the story. There isn't a person in this auditorium who hasn't been where David was at that moment. And what we're going to see in this story is there are so many choices that we can make when we're heading down the road to temptation. And we just watch David as he walks right into it. So he's out on his roof, he sees this beautiful woman, and then he sends someone to find out about her. He finds out, and by question, I love the way the servant said, well, isn't this Bathsheba, like the wife of one of your soldiers? And you don't even hear, David does not even respond to that. But you will notice in the next 3 verses, things move fast. And don't they always move fast when we're being tempted? See, we don't want to think during those times. It's kind of like la 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 la. We're headed. We're going. We know where we're going, right? And that's exactly the language of the passage. I mean, you can just see he sent for her. She came to him. And then he slept with her. And then the only time we hear from Bathsheba is a message that comes back to the palace. And you notice that it doesn't even say Bathsheba. Her name isn't even used. This was an act of lust on David's part. The woman sent word back to the palace saying to David, I am pregnant. Okay, so here we have David, caught. He's in the midst of his sin, and he has a choice to come clean at that moment. He could confess. But no, David does what so many of us do when we're caught, and that is we immediately think of what we can do to hide what we've done. There are hundreds of little decisions we make that set us up for success or failure spiritually. And the community that we surround ourselves with can help us make better earlier decisions before the later decisions that are usually a little too late. One of the things that we can do is to find a mentor to speak into our life. David had a mentor. It was Nathan, but he came in a little too late in the story. If only David had sought his advice before that night with Bathsheba. And we saw an example of mentorship with Samuel and Eli, where Eli helped Samuel hear God's voice. And that's what a mentor can do. They help you learn how to discern and hear God's voice in your life. But it's not just about having a mentor, it's actually also about being a mentor, because we're part of a huge community of faith. And both of these things will help you grow spiritually. My mentor right now is 81 years old. She lives in Lafayette. I still call her all the time. She is literally going to have the house next to Jesus when I get to heaven. I know it. I mean, she's amazing. And she has spoken into my life. I have just picked up mentors everywhere. You do the same. But it doesn't stop there. You got to pass it on. And so I am now involved. I just birthed this new conference. It's called She Grows, and it's an intergenerational women's conference for the purpose of promoting intergenerational relationships. We are part of a chain of faith. You have people ahead of you, and they're passing the baton back. And then you grab the baton, and then you pass it on. This thing is big that we've got. This faith is big. And this is God's master plan. It's person to person to person to person. So pass it on. So in this quest of spiritual growth, don't just have voices that speak into your life. Be that voice for someone else, because both of those things are going to help you grow spiritually. So now take some time and talk about some of the things that have helped you grow in your faith and helped you follow the path that God has for you.